see Vice Chair Schaefer is back, but he's muted. I think his mic is muted.
I never left.
You never left. Oh, Iron Horse. And I just saw Senator Ted Gaines. Let's see if he's back.
I haven't had anything to drink today.
Perfect.
But I see Miss Cohen has had 5 or 6 or 7 swigs of her coffee. That must be a bottomless cup.
It's 1:29. Do we have everybody back?
I'll get that one French fries.
I'm back.
I see Ms. Stowers. Oh, I see Ms. Cohen. I thought I saw Mr. Senator Gaines, but let's see if he's back. Well, Ms. Davis, why don't we go ahead and get started then?
The next item is working group number 4, decline in value relief for January 1st, 2020. The discussion will be facilitated by Chairman Vasquez. We have received requests for public comments. Chairman Vasquez, go ahead.
Thank you. Work group number 4. This issue is an immediate relief for Prop 8, decline in value with COVID-19 for 2020. And we have for this one, members, we have 4 options. Option 1, propose support legislation to change the lien date from January 1, 2020 to a later date in this year only. Option 2, propose support amending RTC 402.5 and Rule 324A, allowing assessors, AABs, to consider comparable sales occurring up to 9 months after January 1, 2020 lien date for this year only. Option 3, issue an LTA in coordination with assessors, taxpayers, and AABs to develop 2020/21 uniform capitalization rate of return for valuing business properties impacted by COVID-19. And then option 4, issue an LTA providing guidance on proactive processing of declines in value and suggestions for determining reliable value indicators. Example is LTA number 92/63. Or option 5 is to basically just status quo and hold the line until we have more information. With that, if the members are comfortable, we'll go ahead and hear from the public. Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our first speaker on this matter, sorry, just one moment. Our first speaker on this matter is the Honorable Don Gakel from the California Assessors Association. Mr. Gakel, are you available at this time to make a comment?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Again, this is Don Gakel, Council County Assessor, President of the California Assessors Association. And yeah, there were a number of other options. The 4 options listed. I do want to point out on the official published agenda online, option 2 reads, propose support amendments to RTC 402.5 and Rule 324A to allow assessors AABs to consider comparable sales occurring up to 90 days after the January 1st, 2020 lien date. If that's been updated, it hasn't been updated on the website.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted
to. Thanks for letting us know. Yeah.
So the proposal, there are proposals for changing the lien date from January 1st, which
that's a lot better.
From a CAA perspective, that's pretty much a non-starter. I doubt there would be legislative support for that. And legislative considerations aside, the property tax system is geared to certain dates, and local timing of revenues for local governments and schools are very precise and fixed in the law, and would rain chaos on schools, local government, state funding, state government financing. And we believe that's all contrary to the public good. So we don't see changing the lien date as an option that the board should consider at all. And as far as considering information beyond 90 days, and your introductory comments said 9 months. Certainly, that is not consistent with current law, and it's not consistent with standard appraisal practice for evaluation date. Certainly in the fee world, and the people especially the CATA people would know this, that no appraiser would look at sales after the date of valuation when determining an appraisal. Certainly the law allows assessors to look 90 days past the lien date. That's in existing law, and assessors do that for their January 1st lien date valuations. But looking at, there's no foundation for looking at sales 9 months after the valuation date in appraisal procedure or guidelines. Certainly, any value that far out would have to be time adjusted back to the date of valuation, and certainly that would negate any reason for looking at those sales. And the Assessors Association would certainly disagree with option 2. Option 3, LTA, coordination of assessors, develop uniform capitalization rates. I know that the CATA proposal, when presented, cited the Mills Act and the Williamson Act as examples of calculated capitalization rates, which the Board of Equalization does provide. However, those are those rates are granted because the use of the property is extremely restricted. In the case of the Williamson Act, property owners are required to sign a 10-year self-renewing contract that prohibits development of their property and full use of their property for any other purpose for a minimum of 10 years. And certainly, and that's part of the bargain in coming up with those rates. Properties vary by type. They vary, rates would vary by within county, between counties, and it would be impossible to come up with any kind of capitalization rate that would be fixed for all types of properties. And so we would recommend rejecting that option. And for processing declines in value, certainly, assessors would be looking at valuations on for the January 1st lien date, but certainly looking at those in accordance with the law and in accordance with the standard appraisal practice to see what the value is as of the valuation date, which is January 1st, 2020. And in that regard, there is no market evidence that would suggest that value would be different on January 1st, 2020 lien date based on events that happened several months after that date. So our basic recommendation would be that the CAA take no action on this item. Existing law provides for assessor actions and a review, and as been stated before, assessors will be monitoring values as the market may change as the year progresses, and we will be well-positioned for making proactive valuation changes, if that's indicated, for the January 1st, 2021 lien date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next public comment comes from Charles Leinhardt, Plumas County Assessor. I'd just like to remind all public commenters to please try and keep your comments to 2 minutes. Thank you. Mr. Leinhardt, are you available?
I am. Thank you, Chair Vasquez and honorable board members. I would echo the comments of Mr. Gakel, particularly with regard to some sort of a common capitalization rate across the state of California. Capitalization rates tend to be higher in small rural counties where investments are considered riskier. They may change depending upon the type of property and where it's located. And it's a typical appraisal practice for appraisers to obtain the capitalization rates that they use directly from the marketplace whenever possible. So they're using localized capitalization rates as the method of their valuations. And so I strongly disagree with that approach. I think Mr. Gakel adequately represented my thoughts on the other items, and so I will yield my time to others.
Thank you. At this time, we have Marcy Berkman, Counsel for Santa Clara County Assessment Appeals Board. Ms. Berkman, are you available?
I am. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As counsel for the Assessment Appeal Board for Santa Clara County, the proposals regarding Prop 8 are all proposals which are not consistent with proper appraisal practices. I urge the board to vote no.
Thank you. At this time, we have Lenny Goldberg, California Tax Reform Association. Mr. Goldberg, are you available? AT&T moderator, can you try and locate Mr. Goldberg, please?
I'd be glad to. Mr. Goldberg, if you're on the phone lines, please press 1 then 0. We'll open up your line.
If he's not available, we'll move forward with Chris K. O'Neill.
Actually, Clerk Davis, I can read, he has submitted a written comment as well, so I can just read Mr. Goldberg's written comment into the record.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Nanjo.
Thank you. This is from Lenny Goldberg, California Tax Reform Association. The board should reject the unconstitutional and unprecedented effort to call economic losses physical damage and continue the status quo in Group 3. The board should reject all options in Group 4. The change in lien date, which violates assessors' principles and practice, comparable sales as if a short, unrepresentative period provided meaningful values, uniform capitalization rates when property taxes are anything but uniform, and processing declines during a short period in the absence of real data. The option of continuing the status quo is far better than any of these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nanjo. At this time, we invite Chris K. O'Neill, Chair, California Alliance of Taxpayers Advocates, CATA. Mr. O'Neill, are you available to make comment? AT&T moderator, can you please try and locate Mr. O'Neill?
Mr. O'Neill, if you're on the phone line, please press 1 then 0, please.
If he is not available,
we've located his line.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Go ahead,
1 moment,
Mr.
please.
O'Neill.
Mr. O'Neill, your line is open.
This is Lenny Goldberg.
Oh, my apologies.
Mr. Goldberg, we read your comment. If you'd like to make further comments, please proceed.
I think those comments and Mr. Gakel's and the assessors and Ms. Berkman's nail it. But one of the problems, I want to comment on the earlier comments about small businesses. Small businesses are mostly renters. They work at home, they work in offices, they work in mini malls. And as renters, there is nothing in any single one of these proposals that says that renters are going to get the benefit of this. You know, the Fed has flooded the banks with money. The banks are forbearing landlords and commercial property owners. We see nothing in this that says we're going to provide forbearance for renters. I've been a landlord. When you're a rent, you know, you have renters. They sometimes win, sometimes you lose. But in this environment, we have substantial forbearance for renters, for landlords, not to mention the tax benefits. It's very, you know, grateful that so many people have called in and said this makes no sense for schools, for cities and counties, and, you know, you're getting nothing out of it. No proof in this that small business or renters, tenants are getting any of the benefits of this. And when you make public policy, you want to say, like the Paycheck Protection Program, we're giving money to businesses who are making sure their employees are benefiting. So all of this is only one directional for the commercial landowner and has no social benefits and great costs to the public sector.
Thank you, sir. Do we have Chris O'Neill from CADA on the line, or Wes Nichols?
We do have Chris O'Neill on the line.
This is Chris O'Neill.
Go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me? This is Chris O'Neill.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Chris O'Neill. I'm the chairman of the board of directors of the California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates. I think it's important, before I get into discussing, I'll discuss option 1 and 2, for us to step back for a minute and realize that the purpose of this task force was to find out if immediate, short-term relief was available for taxpayers. Obviously, the task force didn't have to be convened, and we could have just waited until next year, and there would be relief next year because all the values will be lower by January 1st of 2021. But our purpose here was to see if we could help taxpayers, property owners this year. And although there's been a lot of talk about large office buildings and super regional malls, most properties are small strip malls. They're small office buildings. They have 6 tenants, 8 tenants, 10 tenants. Those tenants are small businesses. Many have closed down. And in those buildings, the leases in place are triple net leases, meaning that the little tenant pays the taxes. Now, what happens in a small strip mall, in a small office building, when 2/3 or 3/4 of the tenants can no longer pay their taxes? So the landlord has to step up and try to pay those taxes. But the landlord has to make a mortgage payment, and he doesn't have the money to make the mortgage payment because his tenants have stopped paying rent. This is the situation that we're trying to help here. So with that being said, I'm going to talk about option 1 and option 2 briefly. And unfortunately, these options have somewhat been misstated, I think, in the write-up. We're trying to find out a way to allow taxpayers to obtain relief not on January 1st, but sometime after January 1st of this year. Now, we could do that in one of 2 ways. We could change not the lien date, but you could change the date of value. And that means you would change when the information could be obtained to determine what is the market value. We could change, and what we're recommending is changing the date of value so you could look at sales, cap rates, rental rates after January 1st in order to determine the value of the property for the January 1st, 2020 lien date. And let me address something that was raised by Mr. Gakel. We're not advocating that we change the lien date for tax collector purposes. We're not advocating that we change the lien date for budgeting purposes for all of the local agencies. We're not asking to change the lien date for the auditor controllers in every county. We're not even asking assessors to put a different lien date on their assessments. We're just saying that we need to look at market information after January 1st of 2020 so that the immediate impact of COVID-19 can be supplied to taxpayers this year. And in order to understand how this all works, the tax bill for the January 1, 2020 year, the first tax bill will be payable December of this year, and the second tax bill, April of next year. If we wait, as Assessor Stone has said, until next year, and we'll take care of this on January 1st, 2021, we're talking about tax relief that will occur December 2021 and April of 2022. That'll be too late because a lot of these small businesses will have lost their properties through foreclosure, through short sales, or through bankruptcy. And it won't matter what we've done because we'll be past that opportunity. Now, let me bleed this into the second option, option 2. What we're saying in option 2 is let's change the evidentiary standard just for this year so that assessors could look at sales that occur in the first 9 months of 2020. They could look at rental rates that as they've changed in the first 9 months of 2020. They could look at cap rates, capitalization rates from sales. And granted, there are not going to be a lot of them, but there's going to be some up through the first 9 months of 2020. Mr. Gakel has said, well, you couldn't do that because appraisers, professional appraisers, aren't allowed to do that. Well, in fact, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice and all professional appraisal practices require professional appraisers to comply with changes in the law. And if there's a law that's specific to that jurisdiction, they must follow that jurisdictional exception. And so what we're saying is, for this year only, change the standard, change the regulation, and professional appraisers under USPAP, under the state licensing requirements in California for appraisers, must follow the change in the law. So again, I don't see that as being a problem. Our objective here, and I think when we started this exercise 60 days ago, 45 days ago, and I know Chair Vasquez, that you made this very clear to all of us, is there a way that we can help taxpayers in 2020? Is there a way to help now? Because small business is important, because we don't want to lose these small businesses. We don't want to see the real estate market for small office buildings and small strip malls and those types of properties to collapse. And this is a way to help prevent that from happening. So I hope that I've made it clear what we're suggesting. We think this is a good idea. We think this is quite doable. We would encourage the board to adopt option 1 and or option 2. I think option 3 may also be a possibility, although I'm going to let my colleague from CADA, Mr. Wes Nichols, talk about that. So thank you for your time. I hope I've clarified this. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Wes Nichols of California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates, CADA. Mr. Nichols, are you available? AT&T moderator, can you please look for Mr. Nichols?
Mr. Nichols, if you're on the phone line, please press 1 then 0, and we'll open up your line.
If Mr. Nichols is not available, we'll move forward with public comment that was received by email. Mr. Nanjo, are you available?
Yes, I am.
I believe the first public comment that has not already been read is one by Sandra Madera, specifically regarding Workgroup 4.
Which speaker is that on the list, Ms. Davis?
Number 23.
Okay, thank you. Got it. Okay. I actually have some before that as well. that haven't been read. But let me go ahead and go to Ms. Madera. And let's see. Okay, Ms. Madera. This, just want to make sure. Working Group 4 comment. None of the options should be considered. Changing the lien date and looking at comparable sales during a brief period of downturn violates good assessment practices. Uniform capitalization rates make no sense when underlying property taxes are so varied under Proposition 13. Declines in value will be picked up in the next assessment based upon real data, not speculative assertions. Choose option 5. Do nothing, maintain the status quo. Additional considerations. These proposals endanger the very health of local governments which fund critical essential services on which we rely on so heavily during this pandemic. This will result in an additional loss of revenue for schools that are already facing major budget cuts, hurting our most vulnerable children. These proposals disproportionately benefit commercial property tax owners at the expense of homeowners and critical services we all depend on. Declaring properties to be damaged and in need of disaster relief to lower values is nothing but an attempt by commercial property owners to capitalize on the crisis. Short-term tax relief is already provided through income and corporation tax automatically when income drops. CARES provide additional huge relief to commercial property owners by allowing them to write off losses against other income and roll back their losses to get refunds from 2017 taxes. The call for across-the-board reductions in commercial property values is illogical. A broad lowering of values makes no
We lost you, Henry. Hello? Henry, you back? Ms. Davis? Hello, is anybody on? I can't hear Henry or Ms. Davis. Are the other members on?
Vet Stowers here.
Malea's good. Ted,
Yeah,
you're good?
I'm here. Yeah, thanks.
So it just nobody can hear Henry, right?
Vice Chair Schaefer in San Diego.
So we can hear each other, but Henry fell, I think he dropped off somewhere. Let's see if he reconnects.
Do you think we could get public testimony from other people that are in the queue, or did we?
Is Brenda still there? Brenda, you there?
Everybody that was on call.
You know, we might have lost everybody that was on call, and I think it's just us on Teams. All right, because I can hear you guys, but I can't hear them.
Yeah, is Schaefer on? I don't see him.
I heard Schaefer, but I don't see him.
Okay.
I'm having lunch and I didn't think you guys would like to see that.
No problem. So yeah, the four of us, I think, could hear each other and see each other. I think we just lost connection with the home base.
We're going to try to get in touch with Brenda through my staff.
I have people texting right now, so
okay.
let me see.
All right.
Let's see if they respond. Let's see if they come on.
AT&T operator.
Oh, here we go.
is now exiting.
No, she's there.
Are we back?
That's what happened last
Oh.
time.
Brenda just texted me
What happened?
saying, we lost you again. Please check reconnect to Teams.
Let me see.
Hello, Henry, Brenda, are you back?
Yeah, we're still checking on our end with our team. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything back.
Tony, yeah.
Do we, can we charge AT&T for this or what?
I thought they were doing this one pro bono after they screwed up last time.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the problem. Now, this is a freebie. What are they saying?
Yeah, she's made it aware. It was an external problem. It went out this morning. Because I told them I was in here yesterday.
Sheriff Schaefer, I'm sorry, Sheriff Vasquez.
Yes.
I'm just looking at our instructions, and we have our contingency plan that if there's technical difficulties, we should join in on the call as co-hosts. Do you guys have that information?
We do, and it's here somewhere. Let me, because you're right. That was like plan B. If something was to happen, we would just phone in, right?
Yeah.
I'll check on that on my end here.
Let me get my hands on it. I was hoping they were going to come back on, but you're right. We may have to go back to the conference call.
Tony, it looks like, or it sounds like the public comment is still going on, that we're just not connected.
Oh, that's even worse. So they're talking and we're not listening, huh?
It sounds like there's someone else who's talking, and you know, at least when I just talked to Regina, that sounded like public comment is going on, and I don't even know if they are aware that we are disconnected.
Should we take a recess?
I know Brenda, and
does Brenda know?
Brenda knows.
Oh, okay.
She's trying to troubleshoot it, but you're right. I don't think the public knows.
Right, because
they're speaking.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Let's see. I'm going to try logging on my phone and see where they're at on the public comment.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. Okay, got it. Okay, they're about to connect.
Oh, I'm hearing back. Looks like they're gonna reconnect us right now. Because otherwise, this is what we would hit now.
We would call
Oh, you
this
got it
number,
right there.
Access code and then.
Good afternoon, members.
I hear Brenda.
This is Brenda Fleming, just checking in with you. We had a temporary interrupt. Yeah, I see you muted. I see it's moving. But a temporary drop or disconnect between the Microsoft Teams environment where you're visibly available and the AT&T call. AT&T is dialing back in. We should have the handshake restored shortly. So if we could just take a few minute break and we'll reestablish the connection.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
So we'll take a 5-minute break. Ms. Davis, are we all back on now, connected?
It sounds as though we're getting some feedback. So if someone is running the meeting on YouTube or live streaming it, if you can please make sure the volume is turned down. It looks like everyone is available. Would you like to continue, Chairman?
Yes, let's continue, please.
Thank you. Mr. Nanjo, are you available to continue reading the written comments that were received for Workgroup 4?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And just as a recap, the last two speakers, I understand we had some connection issues, I read a public comment from Vaughn Villaverde, Working Partnerships USA, and then I read one from Dean Jacobson, who does not state his affiliation. And now I am going on to Ms. Veronica Carrizales, and she is the Policy Director for California Calls. This board should not take any action which will create a loss of revenues for cities, counties, and schools. These proposals endanger the very critical essential services which we rely on so heavily during this pandemic. This will result in an additional loss of revenue for schools that are already facing major budget cuts. I urge you to choose to do nothing and maintain the status quo, and a full rejection of the options listed under Working Group 4. Veronica Casals, Policy Director for California Calls. The next one is a public comment submitted by Michael Russo of the Advancement Project California. And Mr. Russo writes, I just need to find his comment, thank you. We urge the board to adopt the status quo option for this agenda item. In order to safeguard resources that are critically needed for cities and counties at this time of crisis, Advancement Project is a civil rights organization that works to end racial disparities by transforming public systems. As part of that mission, we perform budget analysis to support advocates, community organizers, and residents from across the state, including the Central Valley and Inland Empire, as they call for equity-based investments in low-income communities of color. In these past few weeks, I've had many conversations with partners worried about the pandemic and the recession on their local budgets. They're especially concerned on the ability of their communities to provide critical health services, support the homeless renters and struggling homeowners as they face instability, and provide PPE and other material to public and essential workers. The one piece of good news I've been able to share in those conversations is that while many local revenue sources have declined sharply, property taxes should be relatively stable and provide a key lifeline to cities and counties. The proposal advanced by Working Group 4 would undermine this stability via legally and economically dubious approaches that would harm communities who have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. There are three primary reasons we urge you to reject the options presented by this working group. First and most importantly, these options would rob localities of resources to support those most in need, while directing the largest dollar value assistance would go to the most valuable properties, owned disproportionately by deep-pocketed corporate entities that are best positioned to weather the recession and who have already received substantial assistance via the CARES Act and other federal action. Second, these proposals would create significant uncertainty when local officials need reliable information and projections to inform their budget making. Because of the unsettled nature of the economy, assessing property tax value is very challenging right now. Whether the fall will bring a second wave of outbreaks will have a significant impact on what economic activity looks like in the second half of the year. For example, the proposed reassessments would require much guesswork, administrative complexity, and a flurry of lawsuits and appeals would undermine certainty for localities and property owners alike. Further, several options identified by the working group certainly appear to violate our state's constitution, which would trigger further legal challenges. Finally, these approaches are all deeply counterproductive ways of addressing a potential problem that localities are best equipped to handle themselves. Many cities and counties across the state have created spending programs to help renters pay their rent or get grants to small businesses that help to stay open during the lockdown. Local officials are the ones who have the information and legitimacy to weigh competing needs and determine how to prioritize assistance to property owners given the specifics of their community's health needs, economic situation, and fiscal condition. And unlike the revenue losses that these proposals would create, these programs are reimbursable with federal dollars under the CARES Act, meaning they provide additional resources for California, while these proposals would starve our state. For the foregoing reasons, to ensure California mounts an effective and equitable response and recovery of this crisis, we urge you to reject the proposed options and adopt a status quo approach to these key issues. Michael Russo, Director, Equity and Community Investments Advancement Project, California. The next written commenter is Andrea Moeller, who writes, for Working Group 4, none of the options should be considered. Changing the lien date and looking at comparable sales during a brief period of downturn violates good assessment practices. Uniform capitalization rates make no sense when underlying property taxes are so varied under Proposition 13. Declines in value will be picked up in the next assessment based on real data, not speculative assertions. Choose option 5. Do nothing, maintain the status quo. These proposals endanger the very health of the local governments which fund critical essential services on which we rely so heavily during this pandemic. This will result in additional loss of revenue for schools that are already facing major budget cuts, hurting our most vulnerable children. These proposals disproportionately benefit commercial property owners at the expense of homeowners and critical services we all depend on. Declaring properties to be damaged and in need of disaster relief to lower values is nothing but an attempt by commercial property owners to capitalize on the crisis. Let's see. A broad lowering of values make no sense in a world where base year values are already underassessed. Changing the lien date, tax due date, so that the properties will have to be reassessed right now rather than wait till the established lien date of January 1st, 2021 will create chaos to the system and potentially require rebate payments to commercial property owners. Then I have one from Ms. Michelle DiNardo, who her comments with regards to Group 4, Working Group 4 is, these proposals disproportionately benefit commercial property owners at the expense of all homeowners and jeopardizing the critical services we all depend. Declaring properties to be damaged and in need of disaster relief to lower values is nothing but a brazen attempt by commercial property owners to capitalize on the crisis. Choose option 5. Do nothing, maintain the status quo. Those are the only written comments I believe I have, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Nanjo. Mr. Chair?
Is that the last one, Ms. Davis?
That is the last public comment. Would you like to check with AT&T to see if there are any other further comments?
Sure, as long as they're on the workshop floor.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to, thank you. If you'd like to get into the queue on the phone, you may press 1, then 0. We'll go to line 144. That's line 144. Please go ahead.
Yes. This is Larry Stone, County Assessor of Santa Clara County. Chris O'Neill from CADA is absolutely correct. The entire purpose of this task force was to determine if more immediate relief was available outside of the normal Proposition 8 process, but not relief contrary to the California Constitution and the Revenue and Taxation Code of California. Every issue proposed by CADA is in conflict with the Constitution and existing statutes. Every elected official, that's all of us, takes an oath to uphold the California Constitution. I urge you to adhere to that oath and reject these proposals. One last thing, the lien date and the valuation date are one and the same. They can't be separated. So to suggest that you're not changing the lien date, but you are changing the valuation date
is essentially impossible. Thank you.
And I believe next we're going to Mr. Nichols. Mr. Nichols, if you're in the queue, just press 1, then 0. I'll be able to open your line. Again, Mr. Nichols, thank you, sir. Just a moment. We have the line open for Mr. Nichols. That's line 133.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Wes Nichols. I'm a member of California Tax Agent Association, and I'm listening to a lot of the comments from everyone, and they're really worried about the government budget, and we are as well. But when you look at the cap rate suggestion that we came up with, if you really think about it, it's only going to impact maybe 10% of the commercial properties. And what I mean by is properties that were bought in a time period between 2015 and the end of 2019. Maybe some properties that were purchased between 2006 and 2007 in that period of time. Now, why that matters is that small proportion of properties that were reassessed in that period of time are at a higher value. Those would be the ones that most likely would receive the reduction, as well as the reduction would only maybe be 20% to 30%. So you're looking at a very minimal percent of decline in the assessment roll if this were to pass. Thus, you're actually going to be able to keep majority of the revenue. But what it does do is help reduce foreclosures of commercial properties. And what I mean by that is these are properties that are going to have the highest mortgage values or the highest loan to values and are the most susceptible to being foreclosed on. This is why it's a good idea, is because the further we can reduce foreclosures, the less the impact is going to be for the roll values for 2021, 2022. So this short-term plan is actually better for a long-term budgeting, because then now, if those foreclosures you're looking at could be a bigger decline in value in those years. The cap rate idea was designed kind of a model of the Mills and Williamson Act to provide some uniformity, but also provide relief. And I know many of the assessors have talked about Mills Act and Williamson Act being a society benefit. I can't find another better reason to keep businesses open and reduce foreclosure to benefit the society. And this is really what it does do. So I thank you for your time. And I know there's a lot here on the plate. I would just try to keep an open mind, because a lot of things are changing. The PPE money has been great for most businesses, but however, it's going to run out soon. Banks have allowed mortgage deferments for commercial properties for a month or two, but after that, there's going to be major changes. So a lot of pain is coming, and what we're asking for the board to do is what we can do to reduce that pain and reduce the suffering for the upcoming property tax bills. Thank you.
And if anyone else would like to queue up on the phone at this time, press 1, then 0 on the telephone keypad. I have no one else in the queue. Please continue.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it looks like that was our last public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Members, this is now before us. Is there any questions or comments of the staff, or are we prepared to discuss any possibilities of any one of the 4, or actually 5 options we have?
Forgive me,
Ms. Cohen, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't recall, did the staff opine on this topic? I know they did in the last meeting, but I don't know if there's any additional comments that they want to make on this issue on Workgroup 4. Sounds like there's none. I don't hear. Sounds like there's none. That's fine. I just wanted to check first. I have a few remarks, Mr. Chair, if I may continue.
Sure, go ahead, Ms. Cohen.
Thank you. So first, I think we want to all make sure that property assessments are fair and accurate. And I think this definitely includes reflecting the decline in value. However, any decline in value must be supported by data. And I believe that COVID-19 has presented an unusual challenge that we all publicly acknowledged. So we're moving in uncertain territory, uncharted territory. And this is shorthand for we really don't have the data. We are kind of guessing about what could happen and what may happen. But once more data becomes available, I think, Mr. Chair, that one thing that we could do is we could recommend action to provide a reassessment, or provide for a reassessment or not. We can't recommend reassessment in a vacuum. And again, that's largely due to the fact that we just don't have the data. So why don't we, for the time being, I recommend not taking an action on this item and waiting and take a wait and see approach so that we're able to collect the data and analyze.
All righty. Any other comments from other members? Hearing none, then we will go ahead and do that. Because I think you're right. And we still have time, I think. We're obviously going to be meeting in a couple of weeks, and then if need be, we could even call an additional meeting if things should drastically change. And if information becomes more available. With that, I'd like to, Ms. Davis, I know we're supposed to go to group 5, but I'm a little worried on our time because I know we're going to get cut off at 4. And since we've already had a couple mishaps already, I want to make sure that we give adequate time for going back to our work group number 1. And then if for some reason we run out, the work group 5, which is basically the wet signature, I'm comfortable moving that to another meeting if we have to. But let's see if we can't. We might still be able to finish it. But if the members are okay with it, I was going to suggest that we just go back up to work group number 1 and begin that discussion.
If I could, Chair.
Yes, Mr. Thanks, go ahead.
Yeah, could we, I don't feel like we need to discuss work group 5. We've already taken action on that as a board.
I'm comfortable with that too.
So I'd be in favor of going back to number 1 as you suggested, and then adjourning the meeting.
All righty. Any other comments, or are people comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with the suggestion as well.
All right.
I just want to say I disagree a little bit, so I can make comments on work group 5 if we're not going to be taking public comment. If we're going to, are we just going to be skipping it?
Well, what we could do is that after we finish work group 1, we'll come back to 5.
Okay.
Are you good with that?
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, Member Cohen, I didn't mean to squash your right to speak, so I apologize.
All right, so then we'll go ahead and go with work group 1, which is the 571 property statement. And now, as we all know, that we were able to move that May 7th filing deadline through an executive order with the governor. But there's several other issues that we should consider, or at least discuss now. And members, I'm going to go ahead and begin this discussion. As you know, what we were discussing today is really an offshoot of the original work group 1 issue. It was not really discussed in the work group. It relates solely to the board's interpretation of section 155. The vice chair and I prepared an issue paper, and you should have all received it with some amendments, addendums, I should say, and the political code language that expresses the intent of the 1895 amendment to section 3705, which is currently section 155. The issue paper and associated documents are public, and the chief counsel has prepared an opinion. That is confidential based on the direction of the board of the May 13th meeting. Now, moving forward, I was going to ask my legal counsel, both Christine Cassad and Sue Blake, who assisted Mike, member Schaefer. They did quite a bit of legal research for us, and I wanted to make sure they had an opportunity to share that with you, even though you've all received the document, and kind of walk us through a little bit of the history and get people's thoughts and ideas and see if there's the will of the board to move forward with some actions that we can possibly take as it relates to Section 155. With that, if I could have Ms. Christine Cassad, I believe she's on the line, and Sue Blake join us.
Great.
Yes, sir, I'm on the line.
Sure, if you can go ahead and give your research presentation, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. This is Christine Cassad. I'm Senior Tax Counsel for Chair Vasquez and Sue Blake. Sue, would you like to identify yourself? I'm not sure if she's on the line. So I will go ahead and proceed. Hopefully she can get on the line during the presentation. And
this is Acting Chief Board Proceedings Henry Nanjo. I believe Ms. Blake may be on the public line, which means we'll need the AT&T moderator to unmute her line. AT&T moderator, can you see if you can locate Ms. Sue Blake and unmute her line?
Hi, Ms. Blake, if you are on the phone, please press 1 then 0 so we can identify your line. Again, for Sue Blake, if you're on the line, please press 1 then 0 on your telephone keypad. Thank you.
Ms. Cassad, if you want to...
We're still trying to locate her line. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Should I proceed, sir?
I would say go ahead and proceed. And then if she should connect at some point, we'll ask her if she wants to add anything.
Certainly. Thank you very much. Again, Christine Cassad, Senior Tax Counsel for Chair Vasquez. So members, this is going to be a brief presentation of the issue paper presented to you, distributed to you a week or 10 days ago. And I will not read it. I just will summarize on behalf of the chair and the vice chair. So the issue before you is, should the board continue to exercise its authority under Section 155 to extend deadlines for the performance of any acts by assessors and county boards? And the argument is over the words deadline for the performance of any acts by assessors and county boards, or the debate, I should say. The alternative one, which is being presented by the chair and vice chair, is yes, Section 155 grants the board authority to extend deadlines, all deadlines, including those deadlines for assessors and county boards to enforce taxpayer deadlines. So alternative 2, which is the recommendation of the executive director, is that no, Section 155 limits the board's authority to extend only internal or self-enforced deadlines for acts by assessors and county boards that do not affect taxpayers. So the question really that is before you is, what are the acts that we're talking about that assessors and county boards perform with regard to deadlines, times fixed? And in the analysis that we presented to you in the definition of the terms, one of the key issues is the absence or omission of the word taxpayer in the legislation, the word taxpayer has never been used. In fact, in 1895, which is the first time this section was amended, and at that time it was cited as Political Code Section 3705, when the legislature added the words county assessors, county auditors, and county boards of equalization, it did not include the word taxpayers. And I believe we are all in agreement on that, both the proponents of Alternative 1 and Alternative 2. We agree that the statute does not give the board authority to extend taxpayer deadlines. However, as the chair and vice chair have stated in Alternative 1, we do believe that it gives the board authority to extend assessor and county board deadlines that are enforced against taxpayers for compliance purposes. So that leads us to point 2, which is, what is the legal context for this statute? Because whenever you're trying to determine the legislative intent of a statute, you have to look at its context. And the context of all deadlines, and this statute is definitely about deadlines, the context of all deadlines is compliance. Deadlines are the central means of compliance in every tax system, whether it's the IRS or the FTB, the board, the CDTFA, whoever it is. And that is, if the taxpayers miss a deadline, then the government, or in this case the assessor, enforces the deadline by imposing a penalty, a fine, a suspensions. And in 1895, the assessors even had the authority to seize and sell personal property. Because in 1895, they were given the authority to collect the tax as well as collect the information on personal property. They also had the authority to collect the tax and to seize the property if tax wasn't paid by a date, the first Monday in July. So it's very important to understand that context, because otherwise you get mixed up in the deadlines. Obviously, the taxpayer in every system has a deadline, and just like in the IRS or just like in the property tax context, the taxpayer has to file a deadline reporting their business property by May 7th at 5 p.m. That's their deadline. But at 5:01 p.m. on May 7th, the assessor has the duty to impose a penalty if the taxpayer has not met their deadline. So the taxpayer's opportunity was voluntary, and they could file it or not file it, but they didn't. Then the assessor acts. The assessor doesn't act under the taxpayer's deadline. The assessor acts immediately after the taxpayer's deadline, and his duty is separate from the taxpayer's, and his deadline is separate. And that is well documented throughout the legislative history of this section, as well as every other tax system that we have. And without that, without the assessor's performance of their duty to enforce a deadline against the taxpayer, there would be no compliance or very little. And that is well documented, I believe, on page 3 of our issue paper. And for that reason, and the court, even in 1897, shortly after this code section was amended, said that deadlines are the tax official's enforcement tool, and not the taxpayers. It's specifically designed for the convenience of the tax officials in order to furnish a fit and orderly plan by which all of the duties imposed on them may be performed. And that's exactly what we have here. So now the third point is, and it kind of goes through pages 4, 5, and 6, is the legislative history, and believe me, I'm not going to go through all of it. But I did want to point out the main points that relate to the legislative intent behind this particular statute. So first of all, it's very important to understand that property tax was the major source of state revenue, state and local revenue, but it was 65 to 70% of the state's revenue in all of the early years. And I put down there up through 1890, but actually it was well after that. And one of the problems, which was cited and reported on extensively by State Controller George Olton in the 1860s, was the great disparities that existed among the counties in the tax assessments and tax rolls that were turned into the state and the revenue that was collected. And finally, in 1867, because of the disparities, and not just in the rolls, but also in the assessment practices, Controller Olton urged the creation of a state board of equalization with, quote, advisory and supervisorial power over assessors and assessment practices, unquote. So the legislature responded to that because it was not only at the urging of that controller, but also several governors. The legislature responded in 1870 and on April 4th created a state board of equalization consisting of the state controller and 2 members appointed by the governor. And they began to try to carry out their role of equalizing assessments, that is, equalizing and creating uniformity among assessment practices, assessments showing up on the rolls, and also assessments that were escaping altogether, property that was escaping assessment altogether. And one of the ways it was escaped, obviously, is that it wasn't reported or that deadlines within which it was required to be reported were not met. So Political Code 1872 was enacted that year to help the new Board of Equalization, and that is the first time we see Section 155, which again at that time was Political Code Section 3705, giving the board the power to, quote, extend the time fixed in this title for the performance of any act. So you'll notice in what I just read, and that's quoted on page 6 of the issue paper, that the time fixed in this title for the performance of any act ended right there. It did not include the words of any act performed by the county assessors or the county boards. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. So the next thing that happened is the Supreme Court. The State Board of Equalization was challenged, that is, the work that they were doing. The assessors hated the new State Board of Equalization, as did members of the public, because they had the power to fix the rate of taxation in any county, and that meant they could also increase the roll or decrease the roll, as well as individual assessments. And that wasn't too popular. So in Houston v. Austin in 1874, the Supreme Court held that the board could not really function. It was violating the Constitution because the voters of the counties where the property was located elected their assessors. And since the board members were not elected by the people, they did not have the power to fix the rate of taxation in any county. So in order to cure this, subsequent governors called for a constitutional convention, and the result of that was a ballot measure creating the State Board of Equalization. And that happened on May 7th, 1879, and there were 4 members, 1 from each congressional district. Amazing to think that California only had 4 congressional districts at the time, but that's where the 4 districts came from. And as well as the Constitution also set out some of the duties of the new board. And the state controller, of course, was the ex officio member of the board. Unfortunately, the board was challenged again in 1880, a year later, And at that time, the Supreme Court held that under the Constitution, the board is authorized to increase or lower the entire assessment roll of any county, but has no authority over any individual assessments or taxpayers on the roll. So the board dutifully observed that, but did continue its work of modifying the roll and supervising assessment practices and trying to create uniformity among counties. And then in 1895, just 5 years later, there were continuing problems, and one of them was the personal property. It was, so as a result, because so much personal property was escaping assessment, the deadlines were not being met, and compliance with regard to personal property was extremely difficult. So the legislature enacted what is AB 982, Statutes of 1895, Chapter 218, and the governor, Governor James Budd, signed it on March 28, 1895. It was called the New Revenue Law of 1895. And it established a new a set of deadlines in the succession of deadlines for assessors as well as auditors and county boards to ensure compliance with regard to personal property and make sure that it did not escape assessment, and also that taxes were paid on personal property. So one of the things that's important to note here is that personal property at that time included several things. It included a poll tax, which was, even though we think of it in terms of voting, it was basically an income tax on every male between the ages of 18 and 60. I believe it was $10 a year. And there was also everyone's furniture, whether you were a business or you were an individual, all your furniture, your tractors, your buggies, everything that you had, everything that was not secured to the land was considered personal property, and you had to report that to the assessor or the assessor's deputies. And so that's what this law in 1895 was designed to do, to help assessors capture that personal property that was escaping, as well as to capture the individuals who were not paying their poll tax or not reporting who they were. So, so that began in kind of a strange way. It had the biggest impact, at least that we could find, on the city and county of San Francisco. And we'd be happy to send the links to these articles to you. They were in a newspaper called the San Francisco Call. The assessor in San Francisco at the time complained bitterly that this law was going to be impossible for him, and I think other assessors eventually joined him, to administer, because he normally started his collection of personal property data in March, early in March. Well, the governor didn't sign it until March 28th. And so he complained, and apparently someone in the legislature got wind of that, and at the last minute, they put in a provision that allowed extensions. So apparently, Section 3705, which again is our current Section 155, was amended to specifically allow the board to extend deadlines, these types of deadlines, specifically these new types of deadlines that were imposed on assessors or county boards or auditors. And the way it worked was that under Political Code Section 3640, the assessor or his deputies had this deadline of the first Monday in June of each year, and particularly this year, there was no time period, no waiting. They had to visit every single house or place of business in their district and enroll
property and persons in their, what they called a field enrollment book. Because remember, there were no property statements at that time. So this was called a field enrollment book. And the county auditor was specifically required to give those field enrollment books with numbers on them and receipts included in them to the assessors. And then the assessors deputized various individuals to go out into the field and actually collect this information. And Assessor Seaby of the City and County of San Francisco said that he is going to have to hire 200 deputies in order to do that, in order to meet that deadline by June, the first Monday in June of 1895. Whether he did or not, I don't know, but that's what was reported in the paper. So,
Ms. Pizzazz?
Yes.
This is Ms. Davis. I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to allow Ms. Blake to join. She is available at this time.
Certainly.
Hello, everybody. This is Sue Blake. I'm tax counsel to Mike Schaefer of BOE District 4.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The second deadline that was enacted in this 1895 law, and at least effective for San Francisco, was the second Monday or the first Monday in July, and that was the date by which the assessor had to turn in, had to create and turn in to the county board of supervisors his assessment book that had all of the assessments in it. In addition to all of this, the new law required the assessor to collect the tax. And so the deputies who went around to all of the various homes and businesses were actually authorized to collect the personal property tax as well as the poll tax right on the spot. They also had the authority to reduce the tax on the personal property if they thought the value was unreasonably high. So if the furnishings looked deteriorated and they were no longer worth $1,200, they could reduce it to $1,000. So the board, and then finally, after the book was, this is a different book, not the field enrollment book, but the assessor's book. After the assessor's book was turned in to the county board, then the county board would raise or lower individual assessments on the roll in response to either requests from the assessor or in response to complaints from taxpayers. So that took place in August, and after that it was finally turned into the Board of Equalization. The roll was actually submitted to the Board of Equalization in early September. So there were a succession of deadlines involved in this entire process, and we believe that since this Section 3705, that is Section 155, was amended as part of this new law of revenue law of 1895, that was, in fact, the legislature's intent. There were no other significant amendments to Section 155 after that, other than in 1839, a time extension was allowed. The board could grant time extensions for disasters. That was 40 days. At one point, it changed back to 30 days, and then it went to 40 days again. And they were also in 1965, the board secretary or executive director was allowed to grant extensions, delegated authority to grant extensions as long as they were brought before the board in a public meeting and documented. So we did discuss on page 8 the method of granting these extensions, and frankly, it's difficult to track them because they were originally for 93 years, from 1872 until 1965. The board granted these extensions by order in its minutes. So we just recently received, just yesterday, as a matter of fact, we received from the state archives just 10 years of the board's minutes to see if we could locate the record of those orders, the board's orders granting extensions. We can see them. They're difficult to read because all of those minutes are handwritten. So Ms. Sue Blake has started going through those, but that is not completed. We believe there are also significant records in the executive director's files, probably also archival records, because for many years after the executive director was granted authority in 1965, executive directors used to write letters to individual counties and counties as a whole. It was before letters to assessors existed, granting various extensions for various reasons. And we have not seen any of those. We've not requested any of those records. The only current records that we've been able to locate are the same ones that you can see, and they're documented on page 9 of the issue paper. They're letters to assessors. There are not many of them. The 1980 letter to assessors, we can find it in the index. We can't find the letter itself. And we don't know, again, if all of the letters to assessors are even documented on the website. We don't know if there's some in the archives. I do have to say that in 2007, some of our old records and archives at the board were moved because of the upper 3 floors of the Board of Equalization, that is 24th floor, 23rd floor, 22nd floor, and the 21st floor as well, which is where property tax was. So the executive director's office, the legal department, and the property tax department were all moved, and all of their records were moved. So we don't know if all of the records survived that move and were preserved or were scanned in. I just wanted to make that comment. And then lastly, that takes us to the pros and cons, which we laid out for you, each of the alternatives. I don't know if you want me to go through that with you, but we believe that, just briefly, we believe that the board's role, the pros of alternative 1 are that the board's role in ensuring compliance and oversight should continue. We believe that if this is changed, so the meaning of this is the first executive director to ever challenge this, and we respect that. It certainly, it's been actually very enlightening to go through this and look at the old legislation and the background and the history of the board, and I think we still have more to do, certainly, if you would like us to do that. But we do believe that it's pretty clear that the board does have not only the authority, but also the need to assure that the assessors and the county boards are effective in their efforts to enforce taxpayer compliance. And we point out that there are times where assessors may want a deadline extended for the application of their penalties or a time period for the taxpayer to comply. They might want before they actually take action, perhaps before they even for exemptions, for example. An assessor may disallow an exemption if it's not timely filed, and then they're only allowed to grant a partial exemption. And certainly, there are times where an assessor in a disaster situation sees that, well, if we don't apply that penalty, or we don't enforce that, if we give a little more time for exemption claims to be filed, and we don't invalidate exemptions, then maybe the average will get some more compliance. And voluntary compliance is always less expensive and more administratively efficient than enforcing penalties. So sometimes deadlines are practical from an administrative standpoint. We believe that the time extensions also that the board has granted for the last 148 years it's also important to note that they are not mandatory. Whether it's a letter to assessors or whether it's an individual letter, as many executive directors wrote individual letters to county assessors saying, you have more time before you need to administer this penalty, or you have more time to allow people to file a claim. They don't have to do that. They can decide, no, it's not mandatory. It's just advisory. And so we believe that it actually benefits the board and the board's compliance role in the whole property tax system. That's it. Sue, do you have anything to add?
I would just echo your excellent presentation of the history of how the board came around to extending deadlines and the whole history of Revenue and Taxation Code Section 155 and the underlying political code. I will say that on first blush, when you look at the statute, it does appear to just limit it to the acts of the county assessor or the county auditor and the county board of equalization. However, when you review the whole historical context, you can see that the intent was for the legislature to grant the board broad authority to address all the underlying issues of taxation that those three entities had to deal with. I was quite surprised doing all the historical research, and there's quite a bit more to be done. We only looked at certain segments. For example, we looked at 1890 to 1900 to see how the context of the board changed between the time when the statute said any act and when the statute said any act by the county assessor, county auditor, and county board of equalization. And it was kind of interesting because I started to go through the minutes. I haven't had a chance to look at all of them, but you can see the board, you'll find this surprising, the board met regularly. There was times in June and July when they would meet every day of the week. So board members, you might want to keep that in mind about how much the job has changed. And the minutes, sometimes the minutes are extensive and sometimes they are scant, but you can see that the board acted regularly to extend deadlines even back then, and you can see how the application has changed over the years. I just want to congratulate Chris because she did yeoman's work on the historical research on this. We're going to keep looking and keep looking at the old records. The State Archives is replete with records that are indeed difficult to read. A lot of them, as Chris noted, they're written in cursive, in very faint ink on yellow paper. So it's a little bit of a tedious process, but we think it's important because we want to make sure that we get the right answer for our board members. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chris and the board.
Thank you. Thank you both for your extensive work. Ms. Davis, I understand that we have the Honorable Ernie Dronenberg on the line, and I know he has to leave, so if we can get him on real quick and then we'll open it up to the members.
Yes, AT&T moderator, can you check to find Mr. Ernest Dronenberg?
Mr. Dronenberg, if you're on the line, please press 1 and 0. We'll open up your line, sir.
One zero.
He's on.
Mr. Dronenberg?
Yes.
We can hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Well, first I want to acknowledge what great work Chris has just reviewed. It's very extensive, and I'm one of those that have actually delved into the history of the Board of Equalization. My first year as a member in 1979, I participated in the development of the Board of Equalization's Publication 216, which was the first 100 years. That was from 1879 to 1979. I always thought that stopped in 1979 because that's when I started and they knew it was going to be a new history when I was on the board. But having said that, this publication, all all through this publication, you could see where the Board of Equalization was trying to set a system that was predictable, that was fair, and that was efficient. And I think 155 is all about an efficient tax system. It makes the property assessment practice equal among all counties. You couldn't have one assessor sloughing off and moving deadlines while the other one didn't, because it's a diminishing return, and there's zero gain out of one assessor dropping off so that another county will pick up the difference, because the state needed the money regardless of where it came from, and they spent it wherever it came from. So there was incentives in the systems for some assessors to do favors for their friends, and that's why deadlines could have been moved very easily until the board fully took over and put some power behind them. And, you know, the system needs to have somebody to be the equalizer, needs to have somebody that can look at it from the global standpoint and bring equality, because of the differences between the counties in the north and the counties in the south and the counties in the west. Everybody is different, and it needs to have that. I would also point to the fact that the California Supreme Court, when Prop 13 passed, they made the statement that it's the tax system that has to be fair, equal to every taxpayer, not necessarily that it is an equal taxation where same property could be assessed at different values, but that everybody in the system was treated equally, and that the system was equal. You know, the case at the time was a West Virginia case that held that the West Virginia assessor who would assess properties in different counties, even though they were identical, at different rates. They said that wasn't equal, but the system has to be equal. And so that's why in the Amador Joint Union High School District versus the Board of Equalization, the California Supreme Court sustained the Prop 13. I don't want to go too long. Chris did a great job. And I just would think that it would be almost a tragedy if we went backwards and didn't support Alternative 1. I think Alternative 1 will keep the system, and that it means any act, and that this brings efficiency to the system so that you're not running across the street every time you turn around. And the board should have and does have the authority. And I haven't seen anything that would change my opinion in the last 35 years to that decision. So I would support Alternative 1.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for hanging in there. I know we pulled you away from other meetings, and I really appreciate the fact that you were able to hang in there with us. Ms. Davis, I understand there's other folks in the queue that we need to hear from.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The Honorable Don Gakel from the California Assessors Association is recognized at this time to make a comment. Mr. Gakel, are you still online?
This is Chuck Lenhart representing Mr. Gakel. He was called away from this meeting unexpectedly. I believe that he submitted a letter on his letterhead addressing these issues. I think the question that many of us have is the board has, we believe the board has the authority to adjust deadlines for assessors and boards, as you said. But I think the question is, do you have the authority to change deadlines for taxpayers? Since I'm on the line, I'll go ahead and make my comments as well. I had submitted a letter asking for a copy of the legal opinion from the board staff, attorneys. For me to really opine on this issue, I feel like I need to understand all of the points of view, and I would prefer to get them directly from the source. And it's my hope that you will release those the legal findings before the board takes any action, so that we can evaluate them and comment on them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Charles Malls III of McDermott, Will and Emery, LLP, is recognized at this time to speak. Mr. Mall, are you available? Moderator, can you please try and locate Mr. Charles Mall?
Mr. Charles Mall, if you're on the line, please press 1, then 0.
Chair Vasquez?
Yes, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Is there any problem with the legal research that we have available to us being released to Mr. Gakel before we decide upon it?
No, I mean, if that's the will of the board, I'm fine.
Okay, well, I'm interested that they be informed. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Who's up?
Yeah, this is Member Gaines. Can I speak?
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Gaines.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of releasing our internal legal opinion. It'd be kind of like asking for a legal opinion from another body that is separately elected. I think that's within the purview of the members of the BOE, and I'll remain there.
Thank you.
Chair Schaefer, I can agree with that. It's just that the research memos that are sent to us are one thing, and then our views that we trade with each other and with our attorneys, those are another level of confidentiality. I guess the fear is that they might merge and we wouldn't want to release something we shouldn't. So I accept the caution that Member Gaines has mentioned.
So, actually, Vice Chair, so we actually did release all the information that the research that was done. What hasn't been released is the opinion from our legal counsel, and that's what I think Mr. Gaines is referring to.
Yes, well, I respect the confidentiality of that, Ted. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, before
Mrs.
we
Cohen, go ahead.
thank you. We'll go and hear for public comment and hear other comment. I'm actually very interested in hearing what our staff has to say first and foremost. If we could hear from maybe our general counsel or the executive director next, I would appreciate that, and then we could hear Mr. Gakel or whoever else is calling.
Sure, not a problem.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
So, hi, good afternoon, members and all. I thank you for this opportunity to comment on it. I would definitely like to hear, and like for the board to hear, some input from our legal department. I do appreciate, the work that Chris Kazad and Sue Blake have done in terms of the history and doing that research. Having the history is always helpful, helps you to know where you're going. I think we do have a different opinion, and I think we've weighed in on, where our opinion differs from that. And I'll reserve my comments towards the end of the conversation, just for the sake of time, since we're at 3:15 and we've got a stop at 4. I do want the benefit of the public discussion for you to hear Chief Counsel's position. So if I could have legal, both Mr. Nanjo and Mr. Moon prepared to weigh in and give some comment, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Chairman Vasquez, would you like me to go ahead?
Sure, go ahead.
Henry Nanjo, Chief Counsel.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. We appreciate the research that Ms. Kazad has done, but we respectfully disagree with her conclusions. And again, from your legal department, as we have stated before, we believe that the record, the legal analysis is very clear that Rtc Section 155 only allows a one-time extension, either of 20 to 40 days for assessment appeals boards, assessors, and their deadlines. It does not apply to the taxpayer deadlines. One of the things I note is Ms. Kazad, in her review, went a lot of details into the pre-1911 history of the BOE. I'd like to note that BOE did not have any direct taxpayers until after 1911. So it's kind of I'm questioning how you can interpret the political code to include taxpayers prior to taxpayers actually being involved. So that seemed like an inappropriate stretch. In addition, the history that was discussed by Ms. Kazad tends to contradict what is in our longstanding publication 216, which goes into BOE's history in detail. I won't go over the details in that. But suffice it to say, aside from the two instances where one relating to 9/11 and the other relating to the Oroville Dam situation, this board has consistently not viewed itself as having the authority to extend deadlines for taxpayers. The additional thoughts here are that some of the alterations to individual assessments were challenged. There may have been some early success in reviewing the history of the BOE in multi-county railroad assessments, but that resulted in much litigation, and the conclusion was that BOE did not have direct taxing authority. So again, that runs contrary to the conclusions that Ms. Kazad is drawing in her opinion. I want to make it clear that when there are references to legal counsel or legal opinions in the chair and vice chair's memo, those are the legal opinions of their respective counsels, Ms. Kazad and Ms. Blake, and do not reflect the opinions of BOE legal. And in that instance, I'd like to pass my comments over to Richard Moon, who has done some extensive analysis of both this authority and also the issues raised in the memo. Richard, are you on the line?
I am. This is Richard Moon with the legal department. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I also want to thank Ms. Kazad and Ms. Blake for the extensive legislative research that they've done on this issue. But I think we come to an opposite conclusion, and I think the research that they've done demonstrates that RTC 155 is not intended to extend taxpayer deadlines. But even before you get to the legislative history, it's a basic canon of statutory construction that if the plain language is clear, you don't even need to get to the legislative history, and courts won't look at the legislative history. And in this case, RTC 155 is clear. It says any act by the assessor or the county board, and a statutory requirement for a taxpayer to file is not an act of an assessor. And to say that the relevant act in the statute is the act of an assessor accepting a form, we view it as stretching the language past its breaking point. We're not aware of any statute that says an assessor must accept the form for it to be properly filed. Instead, the statute sets typically a postmark date, and if the taxpayer form is postmarked that date, there's no discretion. And the assessor must accept the form as filed on that date. Additionally, penalties are imposed on the failure to file. They're not imposed on the failure of an assessor to accept the form. And even if we were to get to the legislative history, it fully supports that 155 was not intended to extend taxpayer deadlines. And I won't go through the entire history again. But I will just point out a couple things. I think the biggest thing is that the initial version of Political Code 3705, which was the predecessor to 155, as Ms. Kazad pointed out, initially stated that the board could extend by order any deadline, and there was no limitation limiting it to acts of an assessor, an auditor, or county boards. In 1895, that limitation was imposed. We actually don't know, but we do have some doubt that even the 1872 version was intended to include taxpayer deadlines. But even if we assume that it was, it's very clear that in the 1895 version, if that power existed, the legislature removed that power because it was then limited to acts of the assessor, the auditor, and the county boards. The other legislative history that Ms. Kazad went through from the changes from 1872 to 1895 also support our position. The 1895 changes where the assessors had the duty to collect on the unsecured roll, taxes for the unsecured roll. Each of those statutes that Ms. Kazad had pointed out are specifically worded so that the assessor has the duty and the responsibility, for example, to go out and collect information, to go out and collect the tax. Those statutes are not taxpayer deadline statutes. They're statutes that specifically give the assessor the responsibility to do a certain act. And so we would say very clearly that in those cases, 3705 did give the board in 1895 the ability to extend those acts of the assessors. We're talking about different statutes now, and the statutes are worded differently. And in fact, assessors, as we all know, no longer have the responsibility to collect any taxes. But the statutes are very specifically worded to put the onus or the responsibility or the act in this case on the taxpayer and not on the assessor. And then I would finally also say that it is unclear that the consistent interpretation of 155 for the past 148 years was that the BOE was able to extend taxpayer deadlines. We, like Ms. Kazad and Ms. Blake, have not been able to go through all of the minutes and all of the historical information that may be out there. But in our research and the things that we were able to find, there were only 2 instances, 3 LTAs covering 2 separate events where the board extended a taxpayer deadline, and in one of those, the LTA itself says that it's unclear whether the board, whether disaster relief is possible, and this was for the events of September 11th in 2001. Ms. Kazad said she was unable to locate the LTA in 1980. I have seen a copy of that. It actually has nothing to do with Revenue and Taxation Code 155. It was an announcement of a statutory change that extended deadlines for certain refund claims. And as well, another LTA cited there, 78205, has nothing to do with Revenue and Taxation Code 155 as well. But what I would say is, in terms of the board's position, it seems that at a minimum, in 2001 and in 2011, in those 2017, in those 2 instances, the board had extended the deadlines, but we have not seen a legal analysis, and that may have been because the board did not have the time or felt like they needed to act quickly before those deadlines expired. But this is now a time where we did have the time to do that analysis, and the conclusion that we've reached is that 155 does not allow the taxpayer deadlines to be extended, and at a minimum, it's very unclear that the board had taken that position for the past 148 years, and in fact, I think we would be surprised if we found any other instance where they had done that. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Member Cohen, it sounds like I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Moon, Ms. Kazad. I mean, you guys have done a tremendous amount of work. I almost wish we had this conversation in January, when we were sworn in the beginning part of our term of last year. It would have been helpful as a background. Mr. Moon, what is the purpose of Section 155?
The purpose is to allow the board to extend assessor and county board deadlines. So an example would be the 1604 deadline that was the subject of one of the other topics that had been discussed today. A big a function of 155 that happens every year is that the board and sometimes typically the executive director extends the deadline by which the assessors have to prepare the roll. So the purpose is for deadlines that assessors and county boards have to meet. And in those instances, when the statute sets that kind of a deadline, the board can extend those.
Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair.
I want to thank our Chief Counsel and Mr. Moon for their extensive input, but I would like to move to support alternative 1, and I will quote it: the legislative purpose and historical documentation, as well as the board's consistent application for 148 years, established that Section 155 grants the BOE the authority to extend deadlines for the performance of any acts by assessors and county assessment appeals boards, including acts to enforce taxpayer deadlines.
Second.
Objection.
It's been moved in second, and then Ms. Stowers, you're on.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work that your staff did, Chair and Vice Chair, some great history. I have one concern and one observation. The concern is that we're talking about the workload of the assessors and the board, and yet we're not, and we're having a public policy debate over it, but yet we're not disclosing the Chief Counsel memo. And I really believe that in the effort of transparency, the memo should be made public so that the public can read it as well. I understand the members not wanting to do it, but I will, remind you that back at the May 13th meeting, I asked if it was going to be made public, and I have been asking for this memo to be made public ever since. And here we are, June 9th, and it's still not public. So I'm really saddened that we are not releasing the memo. Now, with that being said, what I've gotten out of this, especially when it comes to 155, is and the current state of emergency, is that there's a need for us to take a seat and really look at our process and our property tax administration. And it may well be, and I think there is a need for this board to have the ability to extend certain taxpayer deadlines, especially when we're in a case of emergency. But I think that authority should be done in partnership with our assessors. And I also think that what we might want to pursue is a law change in 155 so that there's clarity, that there are certain taxpayer acts that this board does have the authority to extend when there's an emergency, but only when we're working in partnership with the assessors.
Thank you. Member Cohen.
Let's see. Hold on, I just want to acknowledge, and it's clear that your office, both of your offices, Chair and the Vice Chair, have done a tremendous amount of work. I appreciate that. However, I believe that we should follow the recommendation given to us by the Executive Director very early on and take time to work with the Governor's office and the legislature to ensure that we have the authority to act in future emergencies. I believe that such a process would prove to be beneficial to us, the administration, as well as the legislature. So, although there is an open motion, I'd like to propose something else. I'd like to move direct the director to work with the chair and determine the pathway forward to achieving the authorities necessary for the agency to respond quickly and appropriately in future emergencies.
Second.
Thank you.
So before we can act on that, let's address the motion, the first motion that's on the floor. And just to answer, I guess, a couple of comments that were made, Ms. Stowers, you know, I have no problem releasing the actual legal opinion that was presented to us to the public, but I didn't think it was at least appropriate to do it until we had our discussion, because at the end of the day, this really falls on us. You know, the public members and other reps that are here on the line are not going to be voting on this. We are. That's why I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to view everything, which we all have. And I just want us to, personally, I just want to go on record that I think we need to begin to exercise our authority. Because to me, I'm not sure whether we have it or we don't have it. Unless we test it, we'll never find out. And what I don't want us to see us do, you know, we're going to see this pandemic, it's going to drag out. And now we're hearing there's going to be a second wave probably in the fall. And I don't want to be sitting here with our hands tied and wait for the governor to make decisions, executive orders at the last minute. I mean, the May 7th deadline, we waited until May 6th. I mean, less than 24 hours before the deadline. And I know he's very busy, and I really appreciate the fact that he did come out. But I'd like to see, if we have the authority, we should exercise it. And I don't see us exercising it without close contact and a close relationship and actually working through some of this with our assessors. I don't think we're going to do this in a vacuum. I think we need to work with the assessors on this. And that's why I would support this going forward.
I agree that we need to bring the assessors into this conversation.
Yes.
And I appreciate your point, Mr. Chair, but the governor and the legislature are also our partners. And I believe in the spirit of collaboration that collaboration should include the assessors as well as a really robust and thoughtful discussion. I agree that generally, our authority is fairly clearly stated to me. I think I have a good understanding as to what we can and cannot do. But I don't necessarily agree with the motion to support, what is this, option 1.
Yeah, Vasquez, there is a motion on the floor. This is Vice Chair.
There's 2 motions on the floor, Mr. Vice Chair. Okay. So, Mr. Vasquez, you certainly can take the first one up, and then you can take the second one.
Will do. Let's go ahead and take the first.
Chair Vasquez,
yeah,
can I make a comment
Gaines.
just briefly?
Yes.
I just want to reiterate your comments in terms of the legal opinion. Felt that was for the board members, and that can be released after the vote. But to do so prior to, in my opinion, was not the proper way to operate as a member of the BOE. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Chairman Vasquez, this is Acting Board Proceedings Chief Henry Nanjo. Like to remind you that we, before we take a vote on the motion, we need to complete the public comment on the motion.
Sure, go ahead.
Issue.
Let's go ahead.
Yes, sir. At this time, we also have Lawrence E. Stone, Santa Clara County Assessor, on the line. Mr. Stone, are you available to provide your public comment at this time? Moderator, can you check if Mr. Stone is on the line, please?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Stone, please press 1 and 0, and we'll open up your line, please.
If Mr. Stone is not on the line, we'll move back to Charles Mall III of McDermott, Will & Emery, LLP. Mr. Mall, are you available at this time to make public comment? If not, we'll move forward to Marcy Berkman, Counsel of the Santa Clara County Assessment Appeal Board. Ms. Berkman, are you available to make public comment on Workgroup 1?
I am. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Although agenda is under 571L, the issue paper pertains also to appeals boards. And I concur with the analysis of Mr. Nanjo and Mr. Moon that the plain language of the statute does not give this board power to extend deadlines for taxpayers, just for the assessment appeals boards and the assessors. I concur with their analysis that the lengthy history cited in the issue paper does not support the conclusion of that issue paper, and the fact that the assessment appeals boards may have, with respect to 9/11 and the Oroville Dam, previously erroneously granted extensions of taxpayer deadlines on those two occasions is not reason for it to continue under that error. And I agree with Board Member Cohen's view that the appropriate thing to do would be for the state board, if it wants the power to extend those deadlines, to seek such an amendment from the legislature. As Ms. Kazad's issue paper pointed out, RTC 155 and its predecessor were amended many, many times over the years, and in none of those times so far has it granted that power to the state board. So if that is a power the state board would like, I believe the appropriate way to go about that would be to request that the legislature so amend the statutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chris O'Neill, Chair of California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates, CATA. Mr. O'Neill, are you available? If not, Wes Nichols, California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates, CATA. Are you available to speak on Mr. O'Neill's behalf?
Ms. Davis, you may need the moderator to locate both Mr. O'Neill or Mr. Nichols.
Thank you. AT&T moderator, if you can you please call for Chris O'Neill of California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates?
Mr. O'Neill, if you're on the line, please press 1 and 0, and we'll open up your phone line. Mr. O'Neill, your line is open.
Thank you. This is Chris O'Neill, Chair of the California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates. Can I be heard?
We can hear you, sir.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate, having known Chris Kazad for many years and Sue Blake, I appreciate all the work that they've done. The same token, I've known Mr. Nanjo for quite a while and Richard Moon for many years as well, and I appreciate the work that they've done on this too. I haven't had time to evaluate their legal analyses, and it's clear that you have 4 very talented attorneys who have looked into this and have come down on 2 different sides. But I want to give this perspective, and that is that the State Board of Equalization's purpose and job is set forth in Revenue and Taxation Code Section 169 and 15606. And that purpose is to ensure uniformity in the equalization process statewide. And uniformity in the equalization process doesn't merely mean that ensuring that assessors have the power to, or the board has the power to extend deadlines for assessors and assessment appeals boards, but it should go both ways. It should be a two-way street, and that if there's a deadline that's related to taxpayers, that such an extension should be permitted to taxpayers as well. The board is an elected board. There's a reason why we have an elected board, and that is because it's a countervailing to elected assessors. That's why we have an elected board. And the elected board should be the arbiter of big picture, what do we call it, allocation of authority, power, even taxpayer rights or assessor rights. And for the board to be limited to merely extending deadlines that only relate to the taxing authorities, or assessment appeals boards, which I think is another issue, and not for taxpayers, seems to me to be one-sided. Granted, I have not read the analysis, but from a policy standpoint, fairness would dictate, and particularly given that the board sits over the whole system, the whole property tax system is charged to the board to oversee, not control, but to oversee. It would only be fair that if the board can extend deadlines for assessors, then it should also be able to do so for taxpayers. So I'll limit my comments to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We've received written comment from Robert Nakami. Mr. Nanjo, are you prepared to read that written comment?
Let me locate that real quick. Hold on. Ms. Davis, is that on the speakers list or is this on one of the emails?
It is on an email. The last name is spelled Nakamae.
Okay, and when was that email sent?
Just one moment. It was sent today at 3:29 p.m.
Oh, let me pull that up. Thank you for that reference. Yes, I have it. This is from Robert Nakame. Okay, I oppose option 2. The governor's executive order already extended the filing deadline from May 7th to May 31st. The board need not take any further action to extend the filing deadline beyond May 31st. With respect to the 571L business property statement filing deadline, RTC Section 441A requires certain taxpayers to file the statement. RTC Section 155 authorizes the board to extend time for the performance of any act by the assessor or county board. It does not give the board authority to extend time for the performance of an act by the taxpayer. And this is precisely what we are talking about. The filing of a form by the taxpayer, not the acceptance of the form by the assessor. RTC Section 463 states that if the 571L is filed late, a penalty shall be added to the roll. So once the 571L is late, the RTC mandates the imposition of a penalty. It is a statutory requirement. RTC 155 does not permit the board to extend a taxpayer deadline. That is clearly stated in the statute, and there is no need to review the legislative history. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nanjo. AT&T moderator, can you please check to see if there's anyone on the line who would like to make public comment at this time regarding this matter?
Yes, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to provide public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. Once again, if you'd like to provide a public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. And we have no one with a public comment at this time. Please continue.
Thank you, AT&T moderator. I believe there is one public commenter, John McKibbin, Committee Chair, California Association of Clerks and Election Officials. Mr. McKibbin, if you're on the line. AT&T
yes,
moderator.
I am.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Actually, I'm really unable to weigh in on the issue paper. This goes beyond anything that clerks really have a standing. I would say it's really something that the boards of supervisors need to weigh in on, because it's going to have a very significant effect if taxpayer filing deadlines for assessment appeals are going to be extended by the board on any given moment. So I can't weigh in. We don't have a position. We don't make a recommendation one way or the other, but I am quite certain that boards of supervisors will have an opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I believe we have one more comment. Just one moment, please. Mr. Nanjo, you've received one more written comment from Elamina Dore. I believe that was just emailed to you today, this afternoon. Last name D-O-R-E.
I don't seem to have one. I have a statement from Peter Kochstoff.
This was emailed to you at 10:58 a.m.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I mispronounced the first name. It's Emiliana. And
I
last
found it.
name, okay, thank
Yes,
you.
it's Emiliana Dore. Comment, please read into the record as I am at work. I have just learned that the board is considering using public funds to provide additional tax relief for commercial property owners. The CARES Act already did this. We are in the midst of a multi-layered national crisis at the moment. It is unconscionable to use public funds at this time to benefit commercial property owners. Our public schools have been a lifeline for our communities through COVID-19. There has been worldwide uprising over racial inequity. It has never been more clear that our communities and schools deserve our full support. This is listed as a comment to Working Group 1. Ms. Davis, I also just got a comment from Peter Kochstoff of, I believe he's with CADA. Yeah, written comments for CADA, but that's regarding Working Group 5, so I apologize. I'm jumping the gun.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it looks like that is our last comment regarding Workgroup 1.
Thank you. All right, now the motion is before us. Ms. Davis, if you could call the roll.
Mr. Chair,
Oh,
thank
sure.
you, sir. Before we just take the vote, I just wanted to say that I think that what we've done here successfully is we've identified a gap in where the current law is, and identify in identifying this gap, we need to resolve it. I'm looking, of course, to resolve it in an amicable and collaborative process with assessors and the governor and the legislature. What's interesting is that we are simultaneously approaching the governor on another executive order proposal for AABs, and then we are assuming authority on other matters. It just seems disjointed. You almost sound like a board that we're schizophrenic. It seems just inconsistent to approach the governor for relief and simultaneously say that we have the authority, all while midstream doing it. So I just want to point that out to the board before we take this vote. Thank you.
And actually, I would look at it from the other side. I think whatever we can do on our own, we should. And those things that we don't have authority, we obviously should be asking the governor. Okay. Because I know he's got a full plate. You know, as I look at everybody's coming at him for all these different directions. I mean, this morning I was on a Zoom call with the Latino caucus, and they're trying to get him to move on certain things. And it's been taking weeks, in some cases months. And I understand, you know, he's overwhelmed. So I kind of look at it that he may actually appreciate the fact that we exercise authority where we have it, and then where we don't, we ask for his assistance. That's the way I'm looking at this. Ms. Stowers.
Thank you, appreciate it. Just curiosity, for the first motion, should it pass, are there any upcoming taxpayer deadlines that this board may want to issue an LTA on?
That would be up to us, and part of this, I think, is to have that conversation also with assessors.
Are there any deadlines coming up within the next 4 months, 5 months?
Well, I think there's several. It's just a matter of whether we decide to act on them.
So the motion, if it passes, just to say this is our position, but it's not following any action.
No. That would be left up to us to bring them back or to make recommendations to the board if we see fit.
Okay, appreciate that clarification.
Not a problem. Ms. Davis, can we call the roll?
Chairman Vasquez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Yes.
Member Gaines,
Aye.
Member Cohen,
No.
Deputy Controller Stowers,
No.
So that passes 3-2.
Chairman
Is there any-
Vasquez, this is Henry Nancho, Board Proceedings,
Yes.
Acting Chief again. Can I get for the record the motion that you just passed?
Sure. I have it in written form, and Mr. Schaefer actually read it into the record, but if you want us to reinstate it or give it to you hard copy.
No, if you can just reread it into the record, that would be good, because there's some time that passed between the initial reading of the motion and the vote. So I just want to make sure that, to confirm that this is what everyone's voting on, so.
I will read it, and Mr. Vice Chair Schaefer, if I miss something, let me know. I have it down as, I move that based on the clear legislative intent from 1895 to the present, we approve alternative 1, that section 155 applies to deadlines assessors must enforce for taxpayer compliance, as well as their own deadlines, and that we published our decision in a letter to the assessors. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Is that correct, Vice Chair?
Unmic yourself, Mike.
You're muted. Vice
Yes,
Chair.
that's fine, Chair.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Members, oh, Ms. Cohen, you had a motion on the floor. You want to reinstate it to us?
And members, this is Brenda Fleming. Once your motion is finalized, I have a comment.
Yeah.
Sure. Ms.
Hold on.
Cohen?
I can't remember that. Oh, yes. I made a motion that we direct the executive director to work with the chair and the vice chair to determine a pathway forward to achieving the authorities necessary for the agency to respond swiftly and appropriately, excuse me, in all future emergencies. That was the motion that I made, and it was seconded by Ms. Stowers.
Any questions, comments by any of the other members?
Mr. Chair, also, I'd like to also add the assessors. I'm sorry, I said.
I thought you said the assessors.
I don't know if I did or not.
I think I originally
I've been
heard
at this for a long time. I'm a little bit fading here. So the executive director work with the chair and determine a pathway forward and work with achieving to achieve the authorities necessary for the agency. And I want to make sure that we name the assessors expressly and specifically so that they are a part of this process.
Well noted. Hearing no other hands or comments, I think we're prepared to take a vote. Ms. Davis?
Chairman
Yes.
Vasquez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Hold on. Before you take a vote, you do need to make a call for public comment. Make sure there's
I'm
no
sorry.
public comment.
You're right. Do we have any public comment on this motion?
thank you. We will have to go to the public comment lines. AT&T moderator, if you can assist us in checking to see if there's anyone on the line who'd like to make a public comment regarding this.
I'd be glad to. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to provide a public comment, please press 1, then 0 at this time. Once again, if you'd like to make a public comment, you can press 1, then 0 at this time. And we have no one in queue. Please continue.
Ms. Davis, if you can go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you, Chairman Vasquez. Chairman Vasquez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
I pass.
Pardon me?
I pass.
Thank you, sir. Member Gaines?
Aye.
Member Cohen?
Aye.
Deputy Controller Stowers?
Aye.
I change my vote to aye and join with the majority. It's to Vice Chair Schaefer.
So that's unanimous. Members, is there any other
Chairman
items?
Vasquez, at this
Yes.
point, I note, this is Acting Board Proceedings Chief Henry Nandro. I note that we're running real close to our deadline as far as time. I think it is required under Bagley-Keene that we ask for comments not on the agenda at this time because we cannot adjourn the meeting without doing that.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. And then just for the, in terms of the process, because I know Ms. Cohen had some comments on the last item, which was working group number 5. We'll go ahead and
Yes.
table that for the next meeting. So
Well,
we
Mr.
can legally
Chair,
finish off.
they're like 2-minute comments. They're like 2-minute comments. It's actually something that we can get done very quickly, but I'm happy to wait till after public comment.
So Chairman
I don't
Vasquez, this is Brenda Fleming. Sorry for the interruption. Before we move to the next work group item and to public comments, I just want to make a statement as it relates to the discussion that we just had. I do appreciate where the board is going with this, and I do look forward to working with the chair and the vice chair's office to really talk about how we move forward on this, on the actions of 155. I think your discussion was healthy. And I think it's important for us to, as I've heard the comments made, that we work collaboratively on this. I just want to weigh in from the perspective of, and you've heard me say this before, as we're moving through this pandemic, it is definitely unprecedented, and I think there's so many lessons learned for us to pick up from this. So, Chairman Vasquez, I think you have talked before when we started this process about some urgent and near-term kind of actions that we would take, some midterm actions and some long-term actions. And so I appreciate, the different interpretations and have heard both Chris Kazad's argument and Sue Blake's along with my attorneys. I think we need to be thoughtful as we are moving forward with this to make sure that we are looking at some of those things that are in that midterm and that long-term bucket, if you will. Because as you know, with these lessons learned, we also want to take the time to think about the implications of the decisions and really going and doing a little deeper analysis that includes fiscal analysis and impact. So I just wanted to put that there for the record. So as we're considering your vote today to move forward with alternative 1, I'd like to make that work, that extra analysis and those considerations. I'd like that to be a part of the body of our work because I really think we need to understand what the decisions, what the implications would be. And I think there will be opportunities, as I said, because of the lessons learned, for us to look at some legislative changes that might help us to remedy some of these things where we feel a little constrained at this point. So I thank my staff definitely for their sound work and for their opinion and weighing in. I appreciate the historical analysis that was done by the chair and the vice chair's office. So I do appreciate the input. I'm just thoughtful about, as always, as you all know, I'm always thoughtful about the implications and the consequences of decisions and actions. So let's just make sure that we're doing the healthy thing so that we're taking actions that are a benefit to the state of California and our taxpayers certainly, and protecting the property tax system. So, Chairman Vasquez, I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to comment.
Not a problem. Thank you for your comments. And I think I saw a hand there from Ms. Cohen.
No, you didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. So so listening to our legal counsel now, Joe, I guess we need to, let's make sure there's nobody in the public that needs to make a public comment so we officially call this to be an official meeting. Ms. Davis, do we have anybody that's willing to speak on just any item?
We have received several, we have received a couple of requests to speak on items not on the agenda. The first request was received from Marcy Berkman, Counsel of Santa Clara County Assessment Appeal Board. Ms. Berkman, are you still available?
I'm still available. My comments were related to 155, and I've already spoken on that. Thank you. It was about the issue paper. That request was submitted before the May 29th hearing. So thank you for checking in.
Thank you so much. The next public comment request that we have came from Robert Slavin, President, Assessment Counseling Services. Mr. Slavin, are you available? Mr. Nanjo, it looks like there was a written comment that was submitted from Mr. Slavin. Can you please check to see if you have that available to read into the record?
I do have that.
Go ahead.
I'll proceed. Members of the board, as you are all aware, the assessor has a constitutional duty to assess all business, personal property, fixtures, and improvements unless there is an exemption or exclusion. Due to the current pandemic conditions caused by COVID-19, many businesses have been closed or are operating at limited capacity for an extended period. While restrictions on businesses are loosening and allowing them to reopen, additional requirements are being initiated to enforce social distancing and the personal protection of business patrons and staff. Many businesses have installed as a requirement or by choice protective shields at registered and service counters to act as barriers to protect employees and patrons from catching or transmitting the virus. Other modifications to structures and fixtures will most likely be made for the same prophylactic reasons to a variety of properties such as theaters, sports venues, malls, hotels, and restaurants, for example. These modifications will be determined to be personal property, fixtures, or structure by the assessor. While some of these enhancements may be easily removed, some may also be easily reinstalled. It is doubtful, for example, that point-of-service shield will be discarded when removed, but instead placed in storage for future use if necessary. While our current situation is not expected to last forever, some medical and health officials have warned of the possibility of a COVID-19 resurgence in the fall and winter. In addition, after this latest pandemic, we all need to be mindful and prepared for future health and safety concerns. In the new world we will face after the stay-at-home order is lifted, there is an expectation from the public and employees that steps will be taken to protect their health. Businesses will need to instill confidence that they provide a safe and healthy environment for consumers and their employees, to rebuild our economy. These safety enhancements, which are either voluntarily undertaken or mandated by law, should be encouraged by our state and local governments and should not be subject to an ad valorem tax. The costs associated with these business enhancements are necessary to grow our economy and should not be discouraged by an additional tax when they are accommodating the business to protect people. We would like to request that the board petition the legislature to amend property tax laws to exempt all personal property, fixture, and improvement costs to protect the public and employees from health-related transmissible diseases. That's the end of the comment.
Thank you, Mr. Nanjo. Looks like that's the last public comment that I'm sorry, there's one more. Catherine Mathis had a comment. Ms. Mathis, are you on the line? AT&T moderator, can you please try and locate Ms. Mathis?
Hey, Catherine Mathis, if you're on the line, please press 1, then 0. Again, Catherine, if you're on the line, press 1 and then 0. No one is queuing up yet. Let me just search, see if I can locate her on the call. We have no response. Again, Catherine Mathis, if you are on the call, please press 1 and then 0. We have no response at this time.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, I believe that's the last public comment that we received for items not on the agenda under item N.
Chairman Vasquez, if I can ask a clarification, this is Chief Counsel Henry Nanjo. There was some discussion of the legal department's opinion on 155 being released after the vote was taken. I just want to confirm with the board members that they're willing to waive the privilege and have that released now that the vote's completed on 155. I'd also like clarification on the Chief Counsel memo on 170 as well.
Sure, that was my intention, unless I hear other, opposition from the members. Sounds like we're all in agreement.
So
Yes.
hearing no objection, I will go ahead and release the Chief Counsel opinion on 155 and 170 that has previously been provided to the board members. Is that correct?
Yes.
Vice Chair says
Thank you very
yes.
much.
Yes.
Thank you for checking. Ms.
Thank
Davis.
you very much.
Mr. Chairman, that was the last item unless you wanted to go back to Workgroup 5.
Yes.
If we could, just real quick, I know Ms. Cohen had a couple of quick comments on that.
Sure. The next item is Workgroup number 5, waiver of wet signature requirement 571 and other forms, facilitated by Chairman Vasquez. We have received public comments on this item as well.
Ms. Cohen, do you want to hear the public comment or go ahead and give your comments first?
I'm going to give my comments first.
Go ahead.
Thanks. And again, just want to acknowledge the work of the BOE Executive Director and the executive team in responding to requests from county assessors to clarify how electronic signatures be received on business property tax statements, particularly during looking to the future. As part of our tax modernization initiative, remember that whole exercise we did last year? The tax modernization initiative, I look forward to reviewing the issues associated with transmitted property tax documents using an email. This is certainly a 20th century concept, and we should be embracing it while at the same time maintaining taxpayer security. And I believe that there is a way without compromising the integrity of the taxpayers' confidentiality. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a recommendation to this body, as well as specifically to Member Gaines, to add this issue to the agenda for our upcoming property tax modernization hearing. To add this issue to the modernization initiative hearing that we have scheduled coming up. I'm glad that we'll be analyzing the issue and exploring the administrative as well as possibly even the legislative piece. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's that's a great suggestion. And I know Mr. Gaines is trying to organize his coming up, and I will definitely have it on mine. I'm not sure when I'm going to do it because I'm trying to do it when we could all actually reconvene live, but we'll see.
That's great. I'd like to talk to Member Cohen as we move forward on that issue.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Davis.
We've received public comment we've received requests for public comment from Don Gakel, President of California Assessors Association. Mr. Gakel, are you still available?
Yes, I'm here. After a long day, I keep my comments too. I want to thank the board and the BOE staff for the LTA clarifying electronic facsimile email documents for the 2020 year. I think that resolved the issue for vast majority of assessors for this year, and I think that the area of digital signatures and electronic signatures is one that will be very useful for the board and assessors to engage in for the benefit of the board, for the public, and for assessors. So I think this is an area where the BOE should move forward and stay engaged. And those are my comments.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Chuck Leinhardt, Plymouth County Assessor. Mr. Leinhardt, are you still available to make a comment? not, we'll move forward to Peter Koskendoff. Are you available to make public comment? AT&T moderator, can you assist us in locating Charles Leinhardt?
Yes, let me check. One moment, please.
Thank you. While we're waiting for Mr. Leinhardt or Mr. Koskendoff, I believe there were written comments that were received as well.
Okay, and this is the AT&T operator. I believe Charles Leinhardt, his line had disconnected.
Thank you so much. Henry Nanjo, are you available to read the public comment from Pat Martinez?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, this is from Pat Martinez. Take action to extend the 2-year statute of limitation deadline for Assessment Appeals Board, AABs, to hear taxpayer appeals on RTC 1604 due to their inability to hold hearings during the shelter-in-place orders resulting from COVID-19. She had that comment for both Workgroup 2 and Workgroup 5.
Thank you so much. That was the last public comment that we've received for Workgroup number 5.
And we should probably make a call for any general public comments that are remaining. If AT&T moderator can help.
If you can
Yes,
assist us in locating anyone.
I did not find Charles Leinhardt. It looked like his line had disconnected. Did you want me to check for anyone else?
Yes, if you can just open the lines for public comments in case anyone has any further public comments on item number 5.
If you have public comment, please press 1, then 0. Again, for public comment, you will press 1, then 0. I have no one. Actually, I have line 40. That's Chris O'Neill. The line is open.
Thank you, operator. Yes, Chris O'Neill, Chair of California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates. One is, I'd like to thank the board very much for having proceeded and provided some relief, interim relief on task force item 5 or working group 5. Mr. Kochadov couldn't speak on behalf of CADA, so I'll speak for him. I think he has a written comment, but CADA is very much in favor of the board proceeding on option 4 for task group 5, which is to develop a plan that identifies ways to expand the approval of e-signatures across the state. The board doesn't just issue, or taxpayers don't just file the 571L form. They file dozens of types of forms, exemption of forms, other types of reporting forms, and it would really be good if the state board could take leadership in this area about signing the myriad of forms, being able to do it electronically and being able to do it securely. And I know that, for example, in the real estate industry, they now sign forms electronically and securely, and those forms are legal documents that are recorded with county recorders' offices. So I think the technology is out there. I think that the board needs to analyze and put its arms around how to embrace that technology and at the same time ensure the security of the system and bring us, well, we're now into 20 years into the 21st century in this area. It would really be helpful to assessors, I think, who don't want to have to store a lot of documents, assessment appeals boards who don't want to have to store documents, I know, and also for taxpayers. So I would just encourage CADA would encourage the board to look into and adopt option 4 under Working Group 5. Thank you very much.
And Ms. Davis, this is Henry Nanjo. I do have the written comment from Peter Kochadov that I can read into the record.
Please, thank you.
I am Peter Kochedoff, representing California Alliance of Taxpayer Advocates. It would appear, since we are past the initial urgency of the May 7th 571L filing deadline, as well as the May 31st extension, that options 1 to 3 are no longer necessary. However, CADA is interested in supporting option 4, where the executive director develops a plan that identifies ways to expand the approval of e-signature programs across the state. CADA is in favor of perhaps an interested parties process that would allow e-signatures on property statements as well as other documents like authorization and appeals forms. We think there is a way to do this without creating an overly complex authentication process. As such, we would encourage the board to adopt option 4. Thank you for your time and consideration. Peter Kochedoff, CMI, Principal VersaTax Consulting, Inc.
Thank you. I believe that concludes the public comments at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, then with that, I'd like to adjourn this meeting in honor of all the folks we've lost with COVID. We continue to lose more and more lives, and I'd like to adjourn in their memory, as well as George Floyd, who I understand is actually having a service today in his honor as well. Is there any other adjournments people want to make?
Chair.
Vice Chair Schaefer.
Before we get to that, I did want to make a motion, before we leave the meeting. I would like to move for adoption of option 4, issue a request to the BOE Executive Director to develop a plan that identifies ways to expand the approval of e-signature programs across the state.
I will second.
Member Gaines, question, if I
Gaines?
could. Did we already vote on this issue in a past meeting?
I thought we did.
Could we get some clarity from?
I'm not aware that we did. If somebody could clarify that.
Is Mr. Nanjo available?
One moment,
Hi.
please.
Henry Nanjo here. I'm not aware of us taking a vote on this one. Ms. Davis, are you aware? Do you have any record of us taking a vote on Workgroup 5?
I do not.
Okay. Yes. Then it would be appropriate to move forward with a motion.
Well, let's do it just to be safe anyways. I guess it doesn't hurt to have 2, right?
That's great. I do recall making a motion on
I thought you did.
electronic signatures at a past meeting, but maybe this is configured a little different in terms of this motion, and I'll support it too.
All righty, so it's been moved, it's been second, and then I think it's even been third here. Seeing no comments, we should take a roll call vote, Ms. Davis?
Chairman Vasquez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Yes.
Member Gaines,
Aye.
Member Cohen,
Can you redirect me? Come back to me.
Deputy Controller Stowers,
Yes.
Member Cohen,
Yes.
So that's unanimous. Worst case scenario is we did 2 motions on the same one, but I think we're okay. With that, is there any other adjournments people want to adjourn in? Memory of anybody else? Hearing and seeing none, this concludes the meeting. We're officially adjourned. Thank you for your patience, everybody. I know it was a long day.
Thank you, members, and Chair Vasquez. Thank you.
Be safe.